This is the best time to be alive, ever. You are luckier and you're blessed with a better sense of timing than any previous human generation. And I'll tell you why. There's never been anyone in your family tree going back as far as you might know or as far as nobody might know who's ever had access to the kinds of things that you have. And I'll tell you in a minute why. And this is not some kind of motivational speech either where I'm going to fluff you up and tell you how great it is and make you feel like you are fantastic and you're bound out of here going, yes, yes, yes. This is real. I'm a history student. That's what I studied at university. I studied some other things that I failed at and wasn't very good at. But history is the one thing I've loved since I was a tiny little kid. I study history because it is the only subject that you do at school and at a school level which teaches you really about people. And history is the only subject that tells you how people think. And it gives you examples of how people think. And when you study history, you have a very good rear-view mirror, and it enables you to judge pretty well what's coming up. Because you can predict the way humans have behaved and the way they'll probably continue to behave, because we're actually quite simple creatures. But I'll tell you where we're going, and this is a lot more exciting. So I said this is the best time to be alive. Why? Well, we're living longer than we've ever lived before. The average human lifespan used to be 30 years, up to just 100 years ago. Now it's 71 across the planet. We're safer than we've ever been. A lot of people get very, very worried that you pick up the newspaper and there are terrorists, and there's Ebola, and there's war, and there's famine, and there's all this horrible stuff happening. We're safer than we've ever been. For most of human history, about 15% of us died in war, or we were murdered. About 15%. Now, it's only 6 to 8 people per 100,000 worldwide that are dying because of violence. Now, we have a very happy statistic in that nuclear warheads are down from 70,000 in 1986 to only 24,000. It's still too many. But that's more than half now of where we were in terms of nuclear warheads. Since the 1960s, we're also eating better. There is more food available per person. It's gone up by a quarter to what it was compared to back in the 1960s. Populations are growing, but they're also growing slower than they were before. So there are too many of us, but at least there are fewer and fewer of us that will mean too many in the future. If you know what I mean, let me give you a statistic here. The average woman had 4.5 children in 1900, and now the average woman has 2.5 children. That's good. We need more space and resources. The poor are also getting less poor, despite what governments tell you and despite what you hear, all the negative press, all the stuff that you see in the papers, all the stuff you hear in the news and you see on TV. Global inequality is falling. The developed world, which we're a part of, is growing faster and closing that gap better than we've ever done before. We're also getting cleverer. This is good news. The IQ test, I know it's a flawed system, but the IQ test that they developed in the 1950s put the average human intelligence at 100 on the IQ scale. If we had to write a 1950s IQ test now, the average for us would be 118. So they have to keep on, recalibrating that test to try and make sense of it. We're also running things a whole lot better. There were only 11 democracies in the world in 1900. 11. There are now 90, and that number is growing. There are less and less autocracies in the world too. And do you know that the entire amount of information a human being would have collected, an average human being, in about 1700, would all fit into one daily newspaper today? Everything they gathered in their lives would fit into one newspaper today. So, how do I know it's getting better? And why is this the best time to be alive? Let me tell you about the cool things that I'm interested in at the moment that you might be interested in too. The first one is drones. These things are amazing. You've seen them, they fly around. They've got 4 blades, 6 blades, sometimes more than that. They have HD cameras attached to them. You can map the Earth from a few hundred feet up. We can take visuals of things that we would never have been able to before. That it's too low for a helicopter. It's cheaper than a helicopter. It's too high to be a person on a ladder. It opens up all kinds of things for us. Apart from HD cameras, these things can follow you around. They're all GPS enabled. They can avoid obstacles, so you can fly them into dangerous places. You can do amazing things with them there. They can do deliveries, and Jeff Bezos of Amazon is working on this as we speak. So imagine the next time you order something online and you press the button, within an hour or two, some little quadricopter comes and lands outside your house, drops off the package and disappears. Much better than any of the delivery systems I've used up to now, especially the post office. The other thing that I think they'll be used for eventually, but you'll have to be brave in the beginning stages, is for human transport. You grab your briefcase, you stand outside, you get a harness on, the drone comes from some central hub, you clip yourself in, you go to a meeting, let's say a couple of Ks away, but it would save you traffic time of an hour. It'll take you 5 minutes to get there. It flies at relatively low altitude. I'm trying to figure this out because no one else has thought of this yet, to my knowledge. If we get this right, it could be quite fun. And they drive it from a central location. So it's all automated. There's no piloting by inexperienced pilots. They all know where the other drones are, so there's no crashing. It'll work, trust me. And the interesting thing is they can make tiny little drones the size of a bee, right? Tiny, tiny little drones. And they can operate in swarms, coordinated swarms. So they can do things as a team, as a flock, that would make unbelievable strides possible in all kinds of directions. And that's just drones. Here's the next thing. Nanobots. Does anybody even know what those are? These are these tiny, tiny, tiny little things. They're about half the width of a human hair, about the size of a red blood cell, that they're already making. And these things can already do manifold tasks. They're going to use these to intelligently destroy disease. They're going to inject a whole bunch of these nanobots into your system, and they'll go around repairing and fixing you. Now imagine a hangover if you go out tonight and you drink too much, and you wake up tomorrow morning and you feel terrible. Not if you have the nanobots, because they'll go in and they'll remove all the toxins, all the alcohol, all the damaging stuff, and you'll wake up feeling 18 every morning as if you'd never ever had a drink in your life. Plus, these things will be able to repair your eye if you've got macular degeneration. Your hearing will never go down. We'll be able to live foreseeably forever once these things come along and do their work. And this is not too far away. It's all part of Moore's law, which is this law that says that every year you can double in terms of processing power. Moore was the guy who started Intel. Every year you double the processing power of the previous year. So now the technology in your smartphone is equivalent to about 10 to 100 times, depending on who you talk to, all the technology, the processing power and technology in the entire Apollo 11 mission, both in the lunar module, in the Saturn V rocket, and at Houston Ground Control. That's phenomenal. In your pocket now, 10 to 100 times the power of what they had in those 1970s moon missions. So these nanobots are going to go around and fix you while you sleep. They'll destroy cancer. They'll repair and replace things. You probably won't have any waste, which is also nice. We won't smell, we won't have any kind of nastiness around us, because that waste product will be on a molecular level re-engineered into something useful. You probably won't have to eat either. For some people this might be upsetting. But you'd need to take in certain things, probably little pills full of the essential nutrients, and these nanobots would help the cells to build the proteins that you need. And not just the proteins, but all the lipids, all the other things that you need to keep the cells functioning properly. And when they detect something wrong, they can fix it on a cellular level. This is not far away. They say that foreseeably, the singularity, where machines will be able to think as fast and as smart as humans can, is within reaching distance. Live long enough to live forever is all I'm saying. Then, of course, we've got the internet, which I think is probably the most obvious one to a lot of people. But where is the internet going? The public internet, remember, is only 25 years old. So it's very, very young. It's probably younger than some of the people in this room. But it's already at the stage where 5 years from now they say everyone on Earth will have access to the internet. Everyone. And that's not me, that's Eric Schmidt of Google who said that. They're talking already about the Ubernet, this idea that people who are like-minded, if you agree or you find that someone in the room has similar philosophies to you, and you decide to build a borderless state between the 2 of you, or the 8 of you, or the 25 of you, or the 100,000 of you, you can essentially have a state without borders that exists digitally. You don't need governments anymore. Hooray to that. Door locks, fridges, all of these things in your house will suddenly be connected to the internet. This will make everything so much easier for you. You didn't forget to lock the door, or you think you didn't lock the door. All you have to do is hop on your phone, or, as we saw in a video just now, you might be able to just say, lock doors, and something will automatically lock your doors. Scary now, but it'll probably happen very, very soon. Education and information, the ability for the internet to become ubiquitous, where everybody has access to it, is a tremendous stride in human progress. Virtual reality and augmented reality are the next big thing. These have to do with the ability to actually show each other what we mean. Can you imagine not having to explain to people what you mean? To be able to just download exactly what you're thinking and give it to them, and they can experience it themselves. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than you think. These little foglets that they talk about, these are essentially tiny, tiny, tiny little robots that will be able to interlock with each other. You won't see them unless they're very, very tightly packed together. But these will be able to create augmented reality in front of your very eyes to convince you that something is there that is not there. Little robots that link arms and make a landscape in front of you. Little robots that can create a smooth surface, a flat surface, a jagged surface. All of that is possible, and they're working on that at the moment. They've already got ones that are small, but not small enough to convince everybody. In other words, if you have very bad eyesight, they'd probably convince you at this point. They can simulate solids, liquids, and gases. Now, they're eventually talking about using these little foglets, these little these manufacturable interfaces to do things like seat belts, so that when your body jerks forward in a car, it's almost like magic. The little foglet turns into a seat belt, which holds you back. I know this sounds like science fiction, but I promise you that people working on this in laboratories right now where we're talking nonsense. You'll be able to upload your whole brain eventually and essentially live forever anyway, even if your body gives in, because you just need a huge amount of storage space and a machine that can give you an avatar and you can carry on living. In our lives, I'm not making this up. You can go crazy on the internet later and see for yourself. Heads-up displays, augmented reality, cars that communicate with each other. You already know the self-driving car. It's not such a success yet. It wasn't going to be immediately. But these are coming, where eventually you can sit in the car, cup of coffee, newspaper, iPad, whatever you want to do, and you don't have to worry about the road. The car will do everything for you. And I think that's probably safer than a lot of the drivers I've seen on the road. Airbags outside the car, so that when you crash, no damage. They're already working on these things. It slows you down if there's an imminent danger. Cars that can read each other, so if they see that car is a little out of control, it'll stop you. That kind of thing's happening. 3D printing. 3D printing is revolutionizing things. You can print objects, you can print designs, you can print body parts. And they're working on how exactly that's going to happen, this interface between biology and science, and in the case of structure, making things out of plastics. They can already create cartilage for you to regrow an ear, for example, on. But eventually they'll be able to make skin. So we won't need to graft skin off another person. They'll be able to actually layer the dermis and the epidermis and all the other little pores and the bits and pieces of the up and down tubes and the blood vessels. They'll be able to make that with 3D printers on you if you get burnt or you get injured. Meat. Everybody says farming's getting too expensive, it's labor intensive, we're ruining the atmosphere, cows fart and all the rest of it. they're going to be able to eventually make meat too. Because what is meat but a bunch of molecules all put together in the right order and sequence and then multiplied by a number? And eventually you'll be able to grow meat on a 3D printer. I know it sounds disgusting, but I'll try it, I promise you. And then you don't have anyone worrying about the animal rights at that point, because if you print it on a 3D printer, no one gets hurt. So here are the things you're not going to need in the future, and this is where I really think we'll get excited. Number one, diamonds. No blood diamonds, and none of those expensive engagement rings. Guys, this is very good news. Diamonds are just carbon atoms arranged in a specific crystal structure. And they're already making better artificial diamonds than the ones that we dig out of the earth. The only reason you don't see them flooding the market at this point is because the people who have all the rights to the diamonds don't want you to have those yet. It'll ruin their business, but it's only a matter of time. Gold, we'll be able to make gold. The old idea that you had only a certain amount in the ground and you couldn't make more is the right idea. That's why alchemy is a discredited profession. But the alchemists might have been right all along, because if we can bombard certain elements and turn them into other elements by adding protons to their nucleus, by adding neutrons, and by adding electrons to the outside of that nucleus, we could probably make gold atoms too. We can make them at very small microscopic quantities now, but sooner or later we'll be able to do that too. So what is wealth at that point? You have to ask yourself. Governments. When we can all talk to each other and we can reach consensus without having to send representatives to an actual room to argue about things, we'll probably get a lot more done. And I think we'll be more empathetic with each other too. Because if you experience things in virtual reality with people who live on the other side of the globe, you tend to feel more that you could, in solidarity, understand their position, their situation, what they have, what they don't have. And I think it'll make us feel far more like a human family. Food, as I've discussed, we'll be able to 3D print food, but we can also find ways of turning a little space into a really sustainable, useful space. We're already doing that, and it doesn't require huge amounts of technology. We don't even have to have sex with real people in the future. Some people don't like this idea at all. But eventually, gamers to a degree already do this. You put on an Oculus or a HoloLens and you can play a game. There's no reason why you can't have sex with anyone you like. And technically, they won't even know. I think that's kind of exciting. You could learn a language. There is the potential for us to be able to upload a language, like a computer can learn to speak a language. And it's also entirely possible, once we've figured out, again, this layer between making the biological creature talk to the technological creature. It's entirely possible. The job descriptions of the future are not written yet. There are probably people in this room, you think you know what you're going to do one day, but nobody knows what you're going to do one day. But it's going to be important. You'll fill a gap. Nobody can teach you what you'll need to learn. There's no degree or course that exists for some of the jobs that will exist in 5, 10, 15 years from now. Don't get caught up in the negative news stories. Don't get caught up in other people's nonsense. Don't worry about racial and political restrictions, arguments about who's right and who's wrong, because all of that stuff will hold you back. Step into the future with confidence, because when you go to sleep at night, you need to know that you are the luckiest generation that has ever lived. Thank you.